So when we say Palestinians, right, almost all Malaysians would refer Palestinians to the Arab Muslims. And I think people around the world would seem to think that Palestinians is equivalent to Muslims by not knowing there are other religions, such as, Christians, Palestinians, and whatnot. So why do you think it's so?
That's a very interesting question, but it also traces back to the question you asked, Baha, on how long Palestinian Christians and Muslims have been living together. And that traces back to early churches. I like to remind people that many Palestinian Christians trace their ancestry back to the earliest centuries of Christianity. And many people forget that Christianity started here. And the Christ was born in Bethlehem, actually 10 minutes away from where I live right now. And the first church started in Jerusalem, not so far away from Al-Aqsa, which is like the Holy Sepulchre Church. And we lived side by side without facing any problems until today. We've shared traditions, we've shared holidays, we've celebrated together. So we still live together in harmony. And it's hard for Palestinians to forget that there are other Christian Palestinians because we live side by side. But then that brings us to your question. I do notice that the world does forget that they're Palestinian Christians. And it's true, but that does not cancel our existence. We're here. I appreciate people who ask questions like you have, exploring the Christian perspective and the Christian existence in Palestine, even though it's that ancient, but many people are forgetting it. But if I want to summarize it, I will summarize to reason why people forget that they're Palestinian Christians down to two reasons. First would be the Zionist narrative and how they're able to manipulate the narrative and turntable against the oppressed and portraying that the oppressed is the oppressor. For example, they refer to us as Palestinians as terrorists, and everything they're doing, they are fighting against terrorism and they're doing good to the world. And even though that's a different point, but it's not different than the topic, because when they manipulate the narrative, they also manipulate the reason of the conflict and they try to narrow it down to a religious conflict. And it's an easier conflict when it's only Muslims against Jews, and it's nothing more than that. And they cancel out the Christian voice because sometimes they even use biblical reasons and the Christian faith or Jewish faith, which as Christians, it's also part of our faith, against us and use it to justify occupation. But I know Baha is going to emphasize more and explain more about that point on what does it mean to use that narrative in sense of Muslim against Jews. And I'll leave him to explain that point more. But then within that narrative, the world is not hearing on the media that there are Christian presence. The media is canceling us out. And policies of Western countries are also canceling our voice and our presence out. And the second reason why you don't hear much about Palestinian Christians is because of the high rate of immigrations. Again, policies of Western countries somehow push Christians to emigrate, and also the Israeli measures on occupation and how they're treating us as Palestinians in general. They're persecuting us, that leading us to immigration. And when you used to be more than thirds of the population before in 1948, which is known as the Nakba or the catastrophe, Palestinians now make less than 1% of the population. So that's a huge loss of people, of natives from this land. So when there used to be more than 30,000 Christian in Jerusalem, today there's less than 4,000 Christians in Jerusalem. And still, many are considering to leave, and the numbers are still decreasing. The main reason why people are leaving is the occupation, is political conditions we're living in, is the apartheid system, the lack of freedom of movement, and other fundamental freedom like access to water, access to electricity. And some believe that Christians will disappear from Palestine within the next 10 years if that keeps on going.